But you can't tell somebody who's a narcissist that they need help. There's like the intervention would be very, very unlikely to be successful. The reason being is because remember, I'm in survival frame. If I'm in that place, I'm in survival. Now there's a spectrum. Everything from malignant, sociopathic, lie about everything. I don't believe that person's redeemable.
When life's visible and hidden battles make you doubt that peace, love, and full-on living are possible, We Win Within brings the proof. Guests crack open their great stories that may overlap with what each of us carries, sharing raw truths, hard-won discoveries, and triumphs that illuminate the road for us all. I'm Hindi Stegman, daughter of Holocaust survivors, speaker, coach, and fellow journeyer in life, inviting you to listen, look inside, and claim the champion already rising in your heart.
So hi, everybody. I'm Hindi Stegman, and I'm your host for the We Win Within podcast. And today we're in for an amazing treat. We have Baird back with us for part 2 of Narcissist No More, or whatever Brian wants to call it, because he doesn't exactly like that name that I have chosen. So, Brian, take it away.
Oh, I don't dislike it. That's not the thing. It's just like one of the challenges with people who are on the narcissistic spectrum is they will often be there their entire lives, right? So it takes maybe some accidents or some extra room for self-reflection or things like that that a lot of people who are on the narcissistic spectrum just never take the time to do. Partly because they've never been shown how to do work on themselves and it's too uncomfortable to do it. It's not even unusual for somebody who's on the narcissistic spectrum to hate themselves unconsciously, but nonetheless, it's just secretly think they're undesirable, unlovable, and as a consequence, it can explain a lot of behaviors, like the constant need for validation, the constant need to be seen as knowing and strong and capable and all those other things, rather than maybe making a mistake, which they could never be accountable for or hope, or admit to, or whatever the case may be. So the other part about the thing about narcissism that may be worth sharing is it's an overused phrase.
Okay.
I think we probably talked about this briefly in our previous recording, but the idea here is that being selfish isn't necessarily narcissism. You can be a narcissist and be incredibly selfish. That's another story. But being selfish is not narcissism per se. And a lot of people go, oh, because that was so selfish, that was narcissistic. No, not necessarily. And I've even heard the phrase that like babies are naturally narcissistic. But I take objection to those things because I don't think when you're a baby, you're really doing much more than just telling people what you need. Are they in some ways an example of what could become a narcissist? Yeah, because it's that constant demand. Look at me, take care of me. It's all about me. But it's just as what I think of as is the conventional description of a narcissist. It's somebody who's in more grown stages of their experience where they are so reactively stuck in survival that they can't see other options for existing. They don't understand. They're so bent on making sure that they are somehow rather feeling good at any given moment. And in order to make themselves feel good, they manipulate their environment, including the people around them, to help be part of that, almost like a conspiracy to make them feel good.
Wow. Brian, do people actually call their kids? Let's say you've got a child who's colicky or or a difficult child. And some babies were. I mean, as an example, years later, after I spoke to my mother about, tell me about me as a baby, she says, "You were a really bad baby." Well, she didn't know the word narcissist. Maybe she
Right.
would have said I was a narcissistic baby, and I would have had a label. Can you imagine labeling a baby?
Yeah, I don't think parents would typically do that labeling, but I think it's kind of a popular phrase inside of the social working world or the relationship support world where they think that everybody has room to be narcissistic. And to a degree, there is some truth to the fact that we can have moments that are narcissist-like. But as I said, I think it's an overused phrase. I think what's most important is maybe looking at what it is that's underneath the hood that makes that person's life very wonky and in many ways untenable, unmanageable, because they're so caught up in an unconscious drive to make themselves feel whole through manipulation of the environment and people around them that they don't have time to look at their behaviors, even if there are bodies on the side of the road, so to speak. This is virtual, not literal. That the bodies on the side of the road that were there in the wake of one's narcissistic behaviors, they're not looking at them being responsible for, accountable for those bodies. Typically, they know they're there, but they'll go, well, that's something that somebody else did, something that they did to themselves, because it's too painful for, first of all, remember I talked about significance before. One of the things that's happening in society is it's too painful to be wrong because that affects our sense of significance. So you see people who make political choices or all kinds of stuff, relationship choices, career choices. All of these things are bent around finding a way for me to feel good about myself if I'm in that narcissistic slash fragile frame. Um, the I lost my train of thought for a second here. So anyway, we'll have to get
Okay,
back to it
so
if I remember.
hold on. So there's an expression, would you rather be right or you rather be happy? Narcissistic personality, would they think like that?
They wouldn't think like that at all. They would always try to be right. It's not like
They'd
I have,
always be
it's not
right.
like they would be doing the choice. Oh, maybe I want to be happy. Um, and see, one of the thing is the people who are that fragile are very busy in service to their fragility. They have to somehow or other feel good if they are self-loathing, or they have low self-esteem, or low self-worth estimations, or they have um, persistent relationship problems, or you know, pick any countless number of scenarios that may affect people who are in that state. Um, they look for everybody else to be accountable to it. Like at an unconscious level, as I said, they're serving their needs like this, and so they aren't completely aware of all the things that they're inflicting or inducing on the environment around them. So as a consequence, it feels to people who are living in the shadow of somebody who's on the spectrum like this, it feels like they are um, like always in quicksand because they're subject to the moods of the person. They're subject to whatever the reaction is in that moment. It's not chess moves. It's not planning down the road. It's like whatever I need to do to feel whole right now, I will look at my environment, people around me, and I will figure out how to make that happen. Could be I want a certain type of food today, and everybody else has to bend to my will just because that's what I want. And if you don't, I'll probably gaslight the crap out of you because I'm going, look, everybody likes Mexican. Why aren't you going to go have Mexican? Why are you saying no to this? I want Mexican. She wants Mexican. He wants Mexican. Let's all go get Mexican or whatever it is. But just really making somebody try to feel bad or wonky for a choice that wasn't aligned with the person who was making the decision to serve their needs. And
So
it's
if
an,
you're living with that type of person, you're living in a reactionary, um, energetic environment all the time.
yeah.
So your nervous system, does it get a chance to relax? I mean, it's almost like being on guard. What are they going to do now or say now? Or how do I need to act so that they shouldn't react? Like, so you're trying to do preventative,
Yeah.
not to.
Yeah. And it may take a while for that to get to that. So let's just say, for example, I have a romantic relationship that I'm interested in. I'm pursuing that romantic relationship, and that person's responding nicely to my advances or my interests, whatever the case may be. So while we're in what we call the honeymoon phase, where I'm pouring on the charm, maybe I'm love bombing. And what the term love bombing is really, I give frequent, undue, maybe even smothering level types of attention to somebody so that they will feel loved, so I can control how they feel about me. So that's what it means by love bombing. And so I may give them lots of gifts. I may give them lots of attention. I may give them lots of time. But at some point, the bill's coming due on that because one, it's not sustainable for me to love bomb somebody forever. I'm not always there. They're not always in the room with me, whatever the case may be. So that love bombing thing does have its limits. And then as soon as that person does something that makes me feel a little bit less significant or maybe inadequate, or maybe, as somebody had said to me recently, as deprioritized, as soon as they're in that place of making me feel deprioritized, I would, I'd get mad. I'd get upset. And maybe I would even say something, because if I've learned the language, oh, I feel like I'm not a priority for you. So if I say that to somebody, I'm probably not saying it because that's my feelings. I'm saying it to somebody because I want them to make me a priority.
Right. So let's say you've got, a couple
Uh-huh.
and they've been together a while and this has been going on and there's obviously a lot of friction and frustration and maybe there's kids involved and they decide to go for help and they go to a marriage counselor.
Okay.
Is it common for the whatever we want to label, let's call it narcissist, let's keep the label, for that narcissistic person, because they're so used to portraying themselves in a certain way that they actually are acting through these therapy sessions. And even though they may agree to certain things or whatever, like, what does it take for them to get it? Or do they ever get it? I mean, not ever, but
I think many, if not most, don't.
They don't get it.
They don't get it because you have to be able to reflect past the framing of being in survival mode, which is very reactionary. So if I'm caught up in constantly curating my environment to make me look a certain way for the people in the environment that I'm in, the people and the space I'm sharing with, is about how do I look? How do I appear? Do I appear weak? Do I appear strong? Do I appear needy? Do I appear fulfilled? Do I appear knowing or unknowing? And for the most part, not knowing, not appearing as strong, maybe not showing up as, whether it's delusional or not, the most handsome person in the room or the most beautiful person in the room or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on in there to kind of make it so that I can find a way to feel good about myself, but I don't do it for myself. I make other people do it for me because that's what
Explain
I
that.
learned. Well,
Explain that.
so look, if I was having a problem let's just say I had a problem in a relationship with somebody at work. So one of the things I could do is just think of that other person as the person causing all the problems for me. Or the other thing is just I could say, what is there about me that makes us engage this way where we're just not doing well together as workmates or whatever the case may be? And I would see this a lot. where and sometimes it would be, I'm going to have to say it gets resolved a little differently depending on what the genders or gender roles that people are that playing. Because I think men tend to kind of just get it out of the way. If there's two guys who don't get along, they're either going to duke it out. I don't mean necessarily physically, but there's somehow or other they're going to put that on the table and figure out how to get along, or somebody's going to die. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it's just like
Right.
that's the way the things. If it's a woman who's going through this kind of thing, there may be other things that show up in more amplified ways, maybe people pleasing or other things that could be. And by the way, I think by definition, almost all narcissists tend to be people pleasers. We'll talk about because that's how they get accolades and praise and all those other things. But so if you're in the workplace and you're having problems with a relationship and you are in very reactive mode, you're just going to keep on reacting to whatever it is. Whereas if you're in a position to be self-reflective, which is not a survival framing behavior. Self-reflection is something where you have the luxury of time, the luxury of energy, the luxury of maybe emotional intelligence or other things that are coming along so that you could kind of go, what is there about me that's making this relationship so friction based? What can I do to make it better? Not just they have to fix themselves or whatever the case may be. So when you get down
But,
to,
but
go ahead.
Brian, hold on a second. We're not socialized to be self-reflective. So the average person, is the average person really self-reflective? Aren't it, it seems to me that we're more socialized to blame the other. It's their
Oh,
fault.
oh.
I'm like this because of, my
Yeah,
mother, my
my mother.
father,
Yeah. All the stories.
all the stories. And even in, let's say you're working and you're in a group and things aren't going your way, you're going to say they're stubborn, they don't want to listen to me.
Uh-huh.
What does it take to be self-reflective? I mean, you use it so easily, but I don't know a lot of people with it, unless they've really worked on themselves and they've gone for help and they've
Mhm.
acknowledged I've got a problem. I don't know that the average person is self-reflective.
I think the average person is self-reflective. They just don't do it a lot. There's the energy of or the ability to be self-reflective is more challenging in somebody who's very fragile because at any given moment they're ready to react to everything that's going on around them, as opposed to looking for options in a more calculated, more experiential, more proactive way to take care of matters that are before me. And then a lot of this has to do with ownership. So you're right. People are ready to blame. They're ready to whine about things and make it sound like it's outside of their own, responsibilities and abilities to take care of it. I think it's enhanced, by the way, by ready access to the kind of technology like social media and devices like phones and things like that. It's much easier for us to get sort of stuck in how we look, which kind of makes us a little bit narcissistic like. And you see this a lot in social media where, we've got, everybody knows about the classic pictures of all the feet on the beach or whatever the case may be. I post, not every, I don't get a chance to always do it because I'm very busy, but I post a lot of the meals I make, and I make my meals from scratch. I don't buy a kit and make something. On occasion, I'll buy a rotisserie chicken or something and use something already made. But for the most part, I'm making meals from scratch, and I kind of like being the mad scientist in the kitchen, and I like sharing what I do. Now, maybe 20 years ago, it would have been look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. Now I just like sharing it. It's not the same story. Is there a little look at me in there? Maybe it could be some residual stuff in there. But if I'm like one of those people who's like always getting my accolades off of social media, like maybe Facebook, and I'm always posting things for attention, especially if it's attention that's going to look favorable. Oh, you're so nice. You made a donation. Oh, you're so nice. You did this. Oh, you're so nice because you like this thing. Or so you're doing things performatively to get attention. Social media makes that readily and easily available to people. So can you be narcissistic like because of social media? Sure. And if you are already narcissistic, social media might be a natural way for you to get your attention.
Well, we won't even go into the whole social media because the whole world is changing through social media. We get our news that way. You know, we could get our
I,
significance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I think people are getting tired of it, though.
Do you?
You're starting to see changes. People are stepping back from social media. Like even in my own energy, I used to spend a lot more time in there. Like not necessarily for news, but for like what other people are saying. It's more like what's the scuttlebutt. I really don't think of social media as a place to get access to news without fact checking at least. But you might want to know what people are saying and thinking. And social media is a really good way to find that out.
So,
So,
so I'm having difficulty um understanding. Maybe
mhm.
understanding is the wrong word. And how does the person that we've labeled a narcissist, how do they on their own go for help? What does it take?
I don't think they can do it on their own.
You don't think they can do it on their own?
Mm-mm. I think this is where somebody clearly needs guidance to get through the process because it's too easy. I work with people who are on the spectrum. I'm a former person from being on the spectrum. And even once in a while in my own journey, like I had some stuff happen over the last few weeks where something came up that kind of was like old parts of me kind of revisited. And that was not full-blown narcissism, but I had some of the underlying tensions of that showing up. Um, Feeling wounded very easily. Um, which is fragility is one of the markers inside the narcissistic spectrum that you can't make a comment to somebody who's a narcissist without them turning it around. You know, even if it's something as simple as, oh, look, you have a stain on your shirt. Oh, that stupid waitress at the restaurant. Like, it's not like, oh, yeah, there's a stain on my shirt. You know, there's a tendency to kind of like curate everything. Oh, I have a stain on my shirt. Oh, I don't want to look bad. Let me blame somebody for it. That kind of thing.
So
So,
if I have someone close to me that
mhm,
I I feel that they are narcissistic,
mhm.
it's creating a lot of tension, um, more than tension. My health is being affected. And I love this person dearly and I want them to change.
Mhm.
What do I do? Where do I go? How do I mean, do you call a friend? Hey,
Yeah, I don't know. I'm working on a book. Unfortunately, it's not available yet. Maybe next year. But I'm working on a book to help people understand what it's like to live in the shadow of somebody who's a narcissist. And it may very well be that somebody who is a narcissist can see themselves and maybe give pause to self-reflection or whatever other examination you want them to go through. But you can't tell somebody who's a narcissist that they need help. There's like the intervention would be very, very unlikely to be successful. The reason being is because remember, I'm in survival frame. If I'm in that place, I'm in survival. Now there's a spectrum. Everything from malignant, sociopathic, lie about everything. I don't believe that person's redeemable in their human journey, in this current human journey. If there's multiple journeys, maybe a next journey or whatever. But but again, it's a spectrum. So the more towards the benign end you can get. And when I use the word benign end, I'm being very careful with the word benign even. It's just not as malignant. So it gets better and better and better. So I don't believe I was ever malignant. I believe that my father was. And there was a good chance if I didn't have some of the discoveries I had in my life that maybe I could have deteriorated and gone into that malignant space. Or I don't, I really don't know how far it could have gone. But instead, I had these discoveries or these door openings or these awakenings along the way that made things happen. And none of them was like a giant epiphany, aha moment type of thing. It was little things that happened along the way that caused those pauses for self-reflection. And in my particular case, I got to this place where I was going, holy cow, I am just not happy. To have that recognition that I'm not happy instead of always trying to force happiness into my life was a very different kind of thing. I was always optimistic, falsely so. I was always upbeat, very often falsely so. Because even though deep down inside I was miserable, I needed to be seen as strong, capable, positive, upbeat, meaningful, the nice guy. Even if I wasn't a nice guy, I needed to be seen that way. So, so the thing is, let's go back to this. The behavior of this kind of fragile ego, and there are other fragile egos, the people pleaser or sacrifice type. They're also not necessarily on the not autism, the narcissism spectrum, but they are absolutely still on the fragile ego spectrum. So somebody who's like, you probably see this, like moms who are like super moms. They get everything done, burn themselves out in the process. You get everything done. And often it's because their sense of identity and understanding of who they are and the power of who they are is caught up in how much they can get done for the people in their life and whatever accolades and praise, if they can get it, that comes from them.
So Brian, how can you guide us today?
Mm-hmm.
The person that's watching, that chances are the person that we label a narcissist may not watch this, and if they do, they won't be able.
They probably won't last past 5 minutes of this.
It won't. They won't be able to say, "Oh yeah, that's me."
Yeah.
But maybe we're going to have someone who is living with a narcissist. Or maybe a child who's in the teenage stage, in that rebellious stage, that is leaning towards, or the child of a narcissist. And I would like to offer some guidance, some pearls of wisdom. This person watching and listening to you, they're frustrated. Where do they go? What do they do?
Well, here's my advice.
Yes.
Don't try to fix a narcissist. Fix yourself. Take care of what's going on for you, because very often this happens, and it's almost always the other fragile ego that I just described. There's different flavors of fragile ego, but for all of us, we get the people-pleasing sacrifice victim on one end of the spectrum of fragile egos, and then you got all the way down to the completely malignant, sociopathic, maybe even psychopathic, whatever is going on at the other end of the spectrum, where you've got people who are basically going to do anything and everything in an instant reactive way. And there are people we see in society, I want to name names, that do this right now, and we see them all the time. So, the point being is that if you're living in the shadow of a narcissist, fixing them won't help you, because you won't be able to fix them. Fixing yourself might help them, but that's a might. But if you can't fix your own circumstances and you're trying to project onto the other person their change in order for you to feel better, then you're going to stay stuck in your prison of fragility too. So if you're living in the shadow of a narcissistic energy, you're probably fragile yourself, and you need to work on your own fragility in order to foster that relationship, if it's fosterable, or at least save yourself. So
what does that look like? I realize I'm watching this, I'm listening to you, Brian, and I have aha moments now, and I'm saying, maybe I am that people pleaser to the extreme, or maybe I'm a control freak. Let's take away the word freak. I'm very controlling in order to have, control in my life. And I have no control over helping the narcissistic person who I am living with. I have to look at myself, you're saying.
Yeah. You have, the thing is there are lots of other powerful words in our journey, but if you look at kind of like an operating moment, just any given moment, one of the things that seems to be very important for us is what is our significance? How do we fit in? What's our importance? What's our reality? And the other one is how confident am I in my current circumstances, or maybe even for that matter, shaping a future? And we all know that futures are undefined and wide open, but the more we try to control, the more there's an indication that we need that certainty. And we're forcing that certainty from controlling the things around us as opposed to looking at what we can do for ourselves to be more confident in the unknown.
Well,
So,
the fear is crippling, right?
yeah, well, it's safety is a paramount, you know, it's like a front and center energy in much of what we do in life. Do I feel safe? Which is part of the certainty calculus. By the way, certainty and significance kind of interconnect. They go hand in hand. You can't completely separate one from the other, because in order for me to feel safe, I still might need to feel significant. And in order for me to feel significant, I might still need to feel certain or safe. So, but the idea here is that looking at those two words, certainty and significance, looking at what we might do in our own lives, behavior wise, that helps try to give us that significance or that certainty. So let's just say I'm on the fragile portion of the spectrum where I am people pleasing and sacrificing and giving my all so that everybody sees me as loving and nurturing and all that. It doesn't mean I'm not loving and nurturing, by the way, but I'm teaching people how to ingratiate themselves as opposed to teaching people to be with themselves. So if I'm a parent and I'm teaching my kids that my sacrifice is really, really important, and that they need to be grateful or appreciative in some way about how I did all this sacrifice and things like that, then I'm teaching them that behavior. And I'm maybe making them fragile or giving them room to be fragile in the process. You can't predict exactly how kids will shape up because some kids will go the opposite of what their parents are. In fact, it's not uncommon for kids to it's like a pendulum swing. One generation does this, the next one does that. So the fact is that my father was a volatile, rageful, um, sociopathic, malignant, narcissistic type energy. Was he formally diagnosed? No, but I can tell you just from having done all this work for the years who he was, what it was about, and what it was like to be his child. And it was a brutal experience. And so very early on, I learned that not to take care of myself by going inside and learning about who I was and loving myself and all those things. I learned from my father, and I also learned from my mother what I needed to do to feel good about myself. But they weren't in a position to go inward either. So they're not teaching me this stuff. So what are they teaching me? They're teaching me to manipulate my environment. They're teaching me to manipulate the people around me in order for me to get what I want, for good or bad. And so now, could I have like rebelled against all that? Sure. It's possible that I would have had a different construct in the nature of who I was, and I could have been in a completely different conversation with you today.
Well,
If any conversation at all. But the fact is that I had no awakening to my parents being who they were. All I knew is that I had to get through each given moment by adopting these almost cultural type behaviors that were going on around me and carrying those into my adult years. So I'm very well trained to manipulate the environment around me.
I don't think we realize if we're living in a home with the narcissistic type of parents, or we're living in a home with depressed parents or angry parents as children, that's what we know. And the assumption is that everybody is like that.
Mhm.
We don't realize that there is another way. And so, without even realizing, we take on that energy for ourselves. And if we grow up to be adults and get married and have children, we then pass that on to our children, who then take that on, and it goes on and on and on. So unless somebody says, no, there's something wrong here, nothing can change because we
Well,
don't even realize there's a problem.
even if somebody says it, this is the challenge. If I'm operating in this place where I can't look at myself because it's too painful to do it, I don't like who that person is, or I don't feel lovable, or I don't feel I really am worth it, because I may be putting on the pretense that I'm super the best guy ever, or I'm the best person you could ever meet, or I could be putting that all out there and expecting you to accommodate my belief system by listening to the things that I do that are great so you can praise me for it, or whatever else is going on. And we'll talk about how relationships deteriorate in a second from the love bombing stage to the next stage, because we haven't quite gotten to that yet. But just look at the idea is that maybe I've been creating a relationship with a new romantic interest, and I've been love bombing that person so that they see me as the greatest person ever, and all these other things are happening um, to boost my ego, to make me feel valid, to make me feel important, to make me feel whole. And some of it has to do with if you say you love me or you act like you love me, that's part of the equation. And so my love bombing you is just so I get love back, or my sense of what love is comes back from the way I give love out. I think love is much different than what we get taught to do at a mechanical level. I think when we think we equate love and need, then it's not love. It's really about need. And I think if you look at what narcissists do to curate their experience, it's really not about real love. It's about need. But in the end, their perspective is that if somebody is in that loving mode, then I'm lovable. As soon as they stop loving me, I'm now going to go to war. It's very unusual that somebody's on the narcissistic spectrum when they get the sense that the party that maybe a romantic interest is now starting to turn the corner and not see them in the same positive light, then they'll start to make that person's life very uneven as quickly as possible so that they can be in control. Because if that person leaves me, I'm in trouble because I can't take care of myself. If that person says something non-positive about me, I'm in trouble because I can't do that for myself. So I'm spending all of my energy in a relationship, whether it's professional, personal, romantic, or otherwise, to get people to coddle me, to take care of my needs that I equate with love and whatever else is going
So is it
on.
common for people to be unfaithful in relationships?
Yeah, I don't know that you can say fidelity in a relationship as a hallmark of fragility or not in a very study oriented way. But I do believe that one of the reasons why people might wander in a relationship, maybe they have this romantic relationship or a wife or a significant other that they're spending their time with, and then they go out and they play the field. So they're probably, in my estimation, in my experience, they're probably playing the field because that person is giving them some sort of positive feedback.
Right.
If you sleep with me, I'm valuable, I'm important, I'm significant, I'm meaningful. So I may not be certain about a lot of stuff, but you're feeding my certainty with my significance in that moment. So, so that cheating thing can be very much a byproduct of that need for validation, including the people who are on the victim side. A man or a woman living in the shadow of a narcissistic energy may still also cheat, but for more like not for the same reasons, but it's still ultimately about validation. It's
Right.
about like, okay, this person has beaten the crap out of me. This person's not beating the crap out of me. I feel more important. Now, fidelity in relationships, I don't believe is utterly dependent on whether somebody's fragile or not, other than the fact that maybe to some degree, when somebody's out there trying to validate themselves by dipping their pen in all the inkwells that are out there, then they are serving their fragility, their validation requirements, all that stuff. So it kind of maybe puts them on. That's why I kind of like to talk about the fragile ego spectrum as opposed to narcissism and people pleasing victim and all, even though that you can kind of lump those in there in different ways. I really do believe that what's been called the narcissistic spectrum should be relabeled as a fragility spectrum. And the more fragile somebody is, the more ugly and dark and malignant and challenging their journeys are going to be for themselves and the people around them. And the more benign they are, and what I mean by benign, they still have some compassion and kindness. There may be still something in there to tap into that gives them the ability to be reflective and maybe even curious and exploratory about relationships. And I think in my particular case, I had the luck of always being curious about the human condition, always curious about it. And I can't remember if this was in our last recording or not, but I did a radio show several years ago. I had a radio show for 2.5 years in the New York area. And I did a show on narcissism because somebody asked me about it. And I said, okay, I'll educate people about it. And I went out there and I spoke about it, including the charisma and the love bombing and all these things that can happen when somebody is on the narcissistic spectrum. And then when I listened to the show after it was broadcast, I'm going, wow, a lot of that was me. Like I didn't, if you had told me 20 years ago I was that, I would have said, no, you're the one, or I would have blown it back at you. But here I had a chance to kind of go, wow, I've done so much change that I can see what I was. But before that, I could never have even seen it, let alone admitted it.
We did
So,
bring that up in the last show.
yeah.
That was actually, I think, your response to how you finally had awareness
Mhm.
that
How to awareness that I mean, I'd already kind of gone through it, just didn't know what I had gone through,
right.
if that made any sense. And it's because of various modalities that I had been working on to go pursue happiness. Remember, I had said before, I had finally discovered with some degree of reflection that I was miserable and I needed to do something about that. And I was married. I would jokingly say happily married, but I'll put happily in quotes. But I was married at the time. Beautiful little girl who's actually now a teenager. All these things were happening during the course of my years. And I was still very much just surviving, making good money. If money was about the quality of who I was, did okay. Had a big house, had cars in the driveway, had, food on the table. Those kinds of conventional hallmarks of success were there for me. The thing that was not a hallmark of success for me was my relationship with my wife was severely challenged and got more challenged every day. And imagine, by the way, she's not perfect, but imagine her having to live in the shadow of somebody who was constantly never could be wrong, always had to be strong, always had to be seen as knowing, always, like imagine living in the shadow of somebody who would smother you with their needs and requirements. It couldn't have been easy for her. It could not have been easy for her at all. It had to be very challenging. She has her own stuff. Don't get me wrong. She had her own forms of fragility that she brought to the relationship, and that's her story to tell. I'm not going to go into all those details, but the fact is that this discussion about fragility, like narcissism is the label we're using for, but frankly, we should be really talking about fragility, because when we are so fragile that we're just busy soothing that fragility, we're not taking the time to step past that. So we're in a prison. Being fragile is a form of a prison. And the idea is do you get through that and get out, or do you stay there your whole life? That's the crux of it. So as I was saying before, I'm writing a book about the fragile ego condition. And the reason when I'm doing that is because I would like to see people go through one way or the other, they see themselves. And it would not surprise me if somebody was narcissistic would see themselves as a victim.
See themselves as a victim.
Yeah. In fact, they will often talk about themselves as being affected by other people who did them wrong, or whatever the case may be. Blame, whine, bitch. all these other things that are going on. So you can see the same behavior in somebody who's maybe a sacrificial energy. You can see the same energy, but the sacrificial energy is looking for the accolades in its entirety just to feel whole. Where somebody who's on the narcissistic spectrum, they're not just looking for the accolades, they're looking for all the other accoutrements that go with that, which is, I'm great, you see me as great, I'm lovable, you see me as lovable. You're like, it's really up there. It's not just validation. So, although they all go hand in hand, right? To be validated and to feel loved may be connectable, but for the most part, truly being lovable is not available to you as a fragile ego. To be truly lovable comes from you.
So, Brian, how do we help people get out of prison?
You give them milestones and markers and signs and lights to shine on things, and you just keep on doing this and let's just see where it comes out of it. So if I was, again, I think it'd be easier for me to be a people-pleasing, sacrificing energy, wholly. Like very often you see that in mothers who are super moms, right?
Mhm.
So I am trying to hold it all together, and I'm looking, and when the praise comes, I live for the praise. Like it's super important for me. Um, and I'm likely, not guaranteed, but I'm likely, if I'm that kind of a people pleaser, I'm also very likely to be connected to somebody who's narcissistic
Wow.
because my energy is kind of a mirror. So I'm now sacrificing myself for that narcissistic person. And as we talked about before, it's like the deterioration in a relationship of quality because somebody's a narcissist and maybe somebody else is the other fragile ego or whatever the case may be. But at a certain point, when one of the parties that is in the shadow of the narcissistic energy starts to wake up and maybe even starts to express things out of that awakening, soon as the narcissistic energy sees this, again, it's very unconscious. It's very fast calculation. What do I need to do to stabilize this so that I don't lose my sense of certainty and significance? I can't have her or him leave because that would be out of control. So I got to figure out a way to make it so that they don't know that they even want to leave. I got to make things very uncomfortable. So I knock the certainty out of them so that I can have my certainty. I knock the significance out of them so I can have my significance. The more wonky and unstable and out of sorts they are, the better it is for me because now I can convince them they're the problem.
So, how do you work with people that come to you, Brian? Um, I'm assuming that something has happened in their life
Mhm.
and they're coming to you and you're helping them on this process. Or is it people that you're working with outside of them realizing they have a problem? And through working with you, you make them aware? I mean, help me out here.
Yeah. So first of all, if they're malignant, there's no help. I don't waste time on them. And one of the first things I have to do is work on where are they in their life cycle, so to speak. Um, and how do they talk about their partners and how do they talk about their careers and how do they talk about themselves? So you get a chance to look very quickly as to whether or not there is a sense of entitlement and grandiosity and other things that go with somebody who's trying to curate this type of thing that makes you see them as great, wonderful people. so, so I'm getting back to your question, which was, how do we recognize this? Is that, I can't remember if that's the question. So
And not even so much recognize, I'm trying somehow to put together for people that are listening
a roadmap to cure.
something, call a friend. I mean, something they have this aha moment. They've listened to you and there's an awareness.
Mhm.
for themselves. Let's say that they are that people pleaser. Um, God willing, someone
Well,
that
one
is
of
a
my
narcissist.
recent client ads.
Yeah.
Now I happen to have known this person for a little while, so I approached them and said, here's what I see is happening for you. So I kind of, not the kind of validation to make them feel good about themselves, but I kind of validated some experiences they were going through. And I said, and I also had an inside opportunity with this person to kind of know what their fears are. So I was able to connect their fear to what was going on with these things. I was observing them and sharing with them that I see, and having them go, yeah, I see that too. Like, this is what's happening to me in my relationships. And I was able to kind of walk them through how they felt, what they looked like, when they got upset, why they were upset. Like, I'm able to. So one of the advantages I think somebody may have is working with somebody who's been there. Now, I've seen a lot of people out there who call themselves former narcissists who say they're still narcissists. I listen to them talk. They're very educated. They're very clear. They're very articulate on these things. I'm not clear on what the line is for where they can say they're not recovered in any way. I know that some of that old behavior can come back up for me. So you could argue that if something can come back it's not the same scale. It's not the same degree of what was happening before, but you can suddenly go, oh, I don't feel so significant today. And then maybe my behavior would be, what do I need to do to create that significance? I might go back to that old behavior, but being aware makes a big difference. Being self-reflective makes a big difference, because then you can catch yourself. So the argument that you can't cure a narcissist falls short on me, only because I believe, I don't know, cure may not be the right word, but I do believe you can move through it and you can get to a healthier state as a human being, mental health, it's emotional health included, and be a quality partner, career, personal friend, lover, whatever the case may be in somebody's life. But you got to be willing to do the work. So this person I was just mentioning to you, is one of the challenges is that during our early conversations, I talked about narcissism, and that person said, do you think I'm a narcissist? I said, without a doubt. I just said it, like, just no, because I'm not their closest friend or their family. The pushback was nominal. If had I been a friend, they might have tried to wiggle their way out of it. And then we're working on these very conversational things about significance and certainty, and how to make it so you're doing it for yourself, which takes all, in my estimation, for my own journey, it takes quite a while
So
to.
am I then going to look to a therapist who specializes in? Am I going
I
to
see a
a
lot of people
life
who's,
coach who's going
yeah,
to?
life coaches probably not.
Okay.
Okay. I don't think life coaches are trained in this material, but it doesn't mean there aren't life coaches who have experience with it. So
Right.
maybe, and life coaching is kind of an arbitrary credential.
I realize that.
So I could like go to ABC School of Life Coaching and get a certificate
Right.
and do, get something from that. But the could you work with a therapist? Most of the therapists that I see are the ones who are helping people who've been living in the shadow of a narcissist. So they're giving them recovery options, recovery, how to find themselves again, how to be whole again. And most of my clients are that. Most of my clients tend to be women, with a couple of exceptions. They tend to be women who've lived in the shadows of a narcissist. And because I know what a narcissist does, I can shed light on the things that they've seen, and they can go, oh, that explains it. Like, I can help them realize that what they experienced wasn't their fault, or wasn't them per se. They might have had a role in it because they were fragile, but it doesn't mean they caused this behavior, that they were just plugged into it.
Oh,
So
is there a step one, Brian? Step one. I'm listening to you today,
mhm.
and now what do I do? What is step one, if there is such a thing?
I wish that I could tell you there is a cut and dry recipe for transitioning somebody from their fragility, whatever fragility they're going through, to a place of wholeness. I wish it was that like that. And you got everybody, life coaches, hypnotherapists, meditation experts, relationship experts, all these things. So they're all spending their energy on helping us basically go from stuck to unstuck. I mean, I'm just oversimplifying the process. But whoever they are, whatever their calling is, it's almost always to help people get unstuck. So when you look at fragile ego as a form of stuckness, so the first thing is to recognize you're stuck. Do you know how many people, if I went out there and said, I'm here, my job is to help people go from stuck to unstuck, they would pass right over the conversation because most people don't see that they're stuck. They're too reactive. They're too caught in survival frame. So they don't know that they're a people pleaser, or they don't recognize enough that they're a people pleaser. They don't know that they're on the narcissistic spectrum. They don't even know that they're unhappy. So they're so busy trying to survive, they're just kind of creating this sort of view of how the world should be and trying to keep controls on all that, as opposed to going, oh, none of this is working anymore. This doesn't work for me. I need to be happy or whole or joyful or whatever else the case may be. But nobody is having this conscious conversation. Nobody's out there on the internet going, how do I get unstuck? I shouldn't say nobody. It's an unusual conversation. But a lot of people are out there is, how do I be happy? So the question is do they go to the right person to help them figure out why they're unhappy? Because it could be, given, let's just say my fragility is around my body image or includes my body image. So maybe I want to lose weight, so I'm more attractive, which makes me more lovable. But I'm operating from a place of fragility right there because I am not looking at myself as whole. I'm looking at myself as broken and unlovable. So when you look at what happens in the human condition is seeking the significance, seeking the certainty, but finding ways to do it in a loving way, which is healthy, as opposed to a fearful way, which is unhealthy. And so when you want to teach somebody who's maybe on the spectrum, whatever the fragile ego spectrum, here's what we need to do. We need you to start realizing that you have this wonky way of getting significance and certainty in life, and it's not working for you anymore. We need to get you into a healthy place to do that. That's the short discussion, but it's not the short experience. To get there requires letting go of a lot of things that are trapped in our frame from childhood and maybe even other lives. I'm open to past life discussion. I'm not running around saying it's absolutely a reality. I only need to know what it is that's in your way. I don't need to know how it got there. So
Well, that's why I feel it's so important to every day be able to look at ourselves naked, because we're not robots. And even though we might have even done a lot of work on ourselves, there are remnants. And I know for myself, there are days when stuff comes up and I'll say, oh my goodness, I could have sworn I worked on that already.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhere inside, there's still something. And having the awareness that that something has come up is such a gift, because then I don't have to hold on to it.
Yeah. And it's like just, it's possible that you could have something come up that's residual from your own fragile history that maybe even paints you in a very non-positive light. It might even affect the relationships around you temporarily or permanently. I've been going through that myself recently. I had something came up and something that I'm spending time with, somebody I was spending time with, and the way it showed up was this: I was still this bruised little boy in certain circumstances that wasn't working in the right way. And I had to, and my pushback was very quick because the old energy was deflect. The old energy was protect and be safe. But in the same time, I wasn't serving the relationship because I wasn't being even intellectually honest with myself. So, so, I don't think that makes me permanently broken. It just means, like you talk about the layers, something that wasn't completely addressed before still was hidden in the background. It resurfaced, and now I'm in the process of working on, all, for lack of a better word, we'll call it healing. But I'm working on, you know, seeing where that little boy is that showed up that was not evident to me before. But that little boy is vestiges of what was happening 20 years ago in my life. It's still left over from that.
Right.
So as you said, new layers of stuff will come up. New layers. It's more like you're drilling down, but you're going down, and if you get these gems and you work on the gems, which are maybe keywords or reconstructions or reframings or releases, as I really prefer to talk about release and revelation. But the idea is release the things that aren't really yours anymore, maybe never were, but you've had them for all these years, and then reveal the truth of who you are, that's always been there, but it's been suppressed and masked by all the survival behaviors you've been living by all these years. So I look at that, what just happened recently, what came up, as it was painful. The relationship may not serve, probably hasn't survived the process, but the thing that was, and I'm actually kind of grateful that this showed up, because it just means I'll be better in the next conversation with somebody or the same person, whatever the case may be. But, the idea is that maintaining curiosity and being self-reflective on these kinds of things, so that when something shows up that's like, oh my, I thought this was done. I thought I was over with this. I thought,
Right.
like you go, okay, let me give myself some grace, give myself some compassion, recognize that it's still there. Initially, I didn't want to deal with it. My initial thing was I pushed back, making excuses, maybe even some flippant comments or whatever the case may be, which didn't help that relationship I was telling you about at all.
Right.
But the so when we're talking about, moving out of the fragile spectrum, it's always a work in progress. Now the question is, what happened just recently for me, will it keep happening? That something I don't want. I don't want to cause an issue in a relationship because of something that's caused based on my fragility. So I need to work on this. I need to do the exploratory. And it has to be heartfelt, not just headfelt. It has to be, because when you get right down to it, our healing is monitored by our head, but the healing doesn't happen in the head, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And interesting that you bring up your situation that just transpired. Last night, I had a client that I've worked with for a little while, who wanted me to do some energy clearing
Mm-hmm.
for him. And I I um I have a floor plan of his apartment, and I wanted to see what was going on. And he actually lives with another guy. And what came up for me when I tapped into him, was he was really angry, like so much anger. It was
Mm-hmm.
rage. And so when we got together yesterday, I said, "So what's going on?" And he started to tell me there was an issue in his business, and somebody was not happy with the work that he did. And he's posting on social media negative things about him, right? And this has enraged him. And he wants to know, should he give the guy his money back? Because he wants it to be okay. And I said to him, "You haven't made peace with your father, have you?" And he goes, "My father? Why are you bringing my father into this?" I said, "I don't know, but your father's coming up." He said, "Yeah. And that guy is just like my father. And you have no idea how
Ah,
terrible
there you
my
go.
father was to me. And he treated me okay."
Mm-hmm.
So by the time we were done, I said, It's not about whether you give the guy the money back or not. If you don't deal with the anger that you're carrying inside with dad, you'll have another client in 6 months from now or 3 months from now. And I said, what would it take for you to be able to truly forgive? Truly, truly forgive. And we went on a whole journey, and this is not for this moment, but I'm only saying that because he had no idea that his anger and his rage, actually, he was so enraged at this man that questioned, the work that he did for him. But really, he was enraged because that's how his father made him feel as a child, right?
Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting how the child wounds, and even though like I spent years working on child wounds that came from my journey through my father as a partner in those experiences. And I used to think that my mother was benign in the whole process. So now he's passed away. He's been gone a couple of decades now. We're very close to that. And the the thing that was very strange is that now I'm exposed to my mother's journey because I'm bird dogging some of her. She's elder and doesn't drive anymore and doesn't, so I'm looking over some of these things and I get something out of it. So it's not like I'm just sacrificing myself here. But the thing is that when I was having this challenge I just mentioned that happened is that I looked back at it and I realized I felt like I was being scolded by my mother.
There you go. There you go.
And it's like, so the wounds from my mother, like, and I kind of knew, like, because I found out that she's a form of a narcissist called a covert narcissist or conversational narcissist. She's kind of both. So why do we call people covert narcissists? Because it's kind of like they're not as obvious. That's part of the process. But the other part about somebody who's a covert narcissist is that they go out of their way to appear stable. It's hard to explain, but anyway, but there's not a conversation you can have with this woman that doesn't come back to her. Doesn't matter what the topic is. That's a conversational narcissist, which is embedded in covert narcissism in many cases. And the when I was having this conversation with this other person, I felt like I was being scolded by my mother, and it doesn't mean I was even being scolded.
Right.
But my sensitivity, my fragility was so strong, so high in that moment that I was just almost like a deer in headlights. I was just frozen. Like, I can't make this person happy, but I want them to be happy with me because now all these old things are coming back. I want them to be happy with me.
So how lucky are you, Brian?
Yeah, lucky I am.
No,
lucky I am.
no. Hold on.
I'm grateful. Don't get me wrong, but boy, am I going through
this woman has come into your life so that you can release the energy with mom and be free.
Right. Well, and that's one of the constructs I believe what healing really is being free.
That's right.
So
exactly.
So anyway, there is a high friction experience going on in my own journey right now because I'm now resurfacing some things that I didn't even know were there. I just didn't even know it. So, like, why did I not know? Because I've been kind of working on myself, dating myself, being with myself, all these other things. I'm a pretty easy guy to get along with when it's just me and me.
Well, so yes, it's easier not to fight with yourself.
Yeah, well, but although that is the sign of mental health issues if you are fighting with yourself. But the idea is,
wow, we've really gone all over the place here today.
But when you talk about this, everything we just talked about is really our wounds are our sources of fragility, and whether or not we are a narcissist who is curating everything for accolades and safety and controls and all these other things, or whether we're somebody who's more on the accolade validation only version of this thing, so I can feel whole in that regard. And very often those people couple up. But what we're really talking about is the wounds that feed our fragility,
Yes.
and how we do the work on those wounds.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, Brian, this has been another wonderful journey that we've gone on together. And it's important, like I say, for me, and I think for all of us, to really look at ourselves every day and what's going on, and to talk to the little kid inside of us and bring joy to that child also.
I say kick the bum out of the house. I'm just joking, of course. But you know, the thing is that there's a risk that we could spend all our time nurturing the wounded child. That's the other part about this thing is people have to find this kind of harmony between being able to progress and being able to release. So, and that's part of the revelation process. So what I've shared with you today, for example, in this relationship challenge that you know, sadly, I'm not sure what the future of it holds, but the the that the wounds that were underneath the hood that I didn't even know still existed. And that part of me who's trained for 5+ decades to not be seen as weak and not be seen as not knowing and not be seen, resisted that thing very, very strongly for a little while. And it, you know, it was painful. It was painful. So it's really interesting to see how we can move forward in life, but we don't need to be completely in service to, quote, the healing, as much as we need to be in service to the progress.
Yes.
The healing is the freedom. The progress comes from the revelation that you can do things with adventure and curiosity and confidence and trust. You know, that you can trust God or the universe or the force or the source, because you can also trust yourself. And even though I have been in this place of building relationship with myself for quite a number of years at this point, something still came up.
Well, we are not robots, and we're human
What?
having daily human
What?
experiences.
What? When did that happen?
We're a work in progress. We will always be a work in progress because there's so many things going on in life, you know, and that's the joy. The joy is in the journey. You know, it's an adventure. It's an adventure. And sometimes the adventure is scary. Sometimes it's joyful. Sometimes, you know, there's all different emotions that go along with being on a journey, right?
Yeah.
So we're on the journey of life.
Right. And maybe you could look at it something as simple as the dividing line between nervous and excited.
Nervous and excited. Okay.
It's the dividing line is what your attention and intention are on these things. So if I'm going to focus on being nervous, I'm probably already working on fear of failure or fear of whatever. If I'm working on being excited, I'm working on all the positive prospects that come, possibilities that come out of that. So it's the same energy, being nervous and excited. It's just a different way of looking at that energy.
Well, I am really excited about the wonderful discussion that we had today. I'm really excited where I know there's someone out there that is going to have an aha moment and be able to go deep inside. And I'm excited for the future for you, for me, and for everyone.
Cool.
So, Brian, thank you again. And this has been an amazing journey today. And we win within. Bye-bye.